So I'm from Curve. We're a payments company. What we're trying to do is make it easy for people to stitch together their financial lives from all the different bank accounts they have, all the different financial apps, tools that they want to use as part of their financial lives, whether it's for budgeting or saving more easily, stitch it together into one personal money hub. I'm not going to talk about Curve, but that's what we do. That's where I work. And we have a website, obviously, imaginecurve.com, and you can have a look a bit more about us there. So, yeah, Stephen said come and talk about growth. I've been at Curve for a year, and I joined to work on analytics to support other bits of the business without any real responsibility for making anything meaningful happen, like building operations, building a product, or acquiring customers. So in the last 6 months I've taken on the kind of responsibility of trying to build a growth team and a growth capability. So unfortunately that responsibility is mine. And I'm a bit nervous about talking to you about, I can't tell you about the 5 million customers we've got. So what I thought I'd do was talk about what I would say to myself if I went back 6-12 months and say, these are mistakes you're about to make. Try not to make those, and here are the things to think about and the people whose advice you should take to avoid those mistakes. So you may all be experts in growth. If you are, I apologise for that. But if any of you are in the situation that I was in 6-12 months ago, where I really didn't know much about this, and I was just coming to terms with the right way of thinking, who are the right people, whose advice I should follow, if you're in that situation, then this may have some ideas that are helpful for you. It's quite critical to myself because it's a lot about the mistakes I made. So I was hoping we could keep it between us, but I forgot you're filming it, so if we just keep it between you, me, and the rest of the internet, then that should be okay. So this is a note to myself, and hopefully there are some people in a similar situation to where I was. What I'm not going to do is dwell on this page, but I kind of wish that I had this, as I was asking myself this week, what are the ways of thinking that I now use regularly? Who are the people that I go to for answers? And what are the different mindsets that I use as I'm thinking through how we do things across growth? This encompasses the bulk of where I go to for information. You'll recognise a whole bunch of it, I'm sure. Build, measure, learn, and so on. If I was starting again, and I would give this to me and say, Google those things on the left and go and read about them. Find these people on the right, subscribe to their Twitter feeds, subscribe to their blogs, and understand what are the main things those guys are good at. But understand that as you're working through growth, I think there are kind of 4 hats that are worth wearing. The strategy of how do we orchestrate the kind of the process, what should we focus on at any given point in time, what's the set of skills that we need to apply in the growth team, a design mentality, the development mentality so we can actually get stuff built, get it built quickly, and the data and analytics capability to figure out, 1, what's the right way of setting up new ideas so that we can collect meaningful data, and 2, generating the insights. So I'm absolutely not going to dwell on that, but this is a cheat sheet that I would have given myself to say, go away, read that, come back in a month, and then I'll start to pay you a salary. That's what I would have said to myself. So the first lesson that I would have taught myself is understand the stage of the business that you're at. We rambled into all sorts of different things, coming in every day. What's a new idea? Maybe we could try something on the website, try something on conversion, try this for referral. And it's attractive to think that. I mean, if things like move fast and break things, it could equate in your minds to try anything that you can think of. At the start, the way I think about it is build the love before you start buying acquisition. So what is it that you need to do at the start is really understand what is it that people would love in your products, and how are you measuring that? Just focusing on that rather than how we're optimizing for every different part of the funnel. I don't think we ever explicitly had a discussion about what stage is our business at and what does that mean for what we should be trying to optimize in terms of growth right now. We played across all sorts of different bits of the acquisition funnel while we were still building the core products and trying to figure out what would it take to be sticky. What I would have said is stop thinking about every bit of the conversion funnel. Think about stickiness. Who are the sticky customers on your product? What is it that they like about it? How can you build around that so that you maximize the growth of that sticky component, maximize their share of the mix of your customers, maximize what it is you put into the products that drives that degree of stickiness. Instead, it was just a kind of a little bit of a loose mental free-for-all about what are all the things we could do. Eric Ries has spoken a lot about the three different growth engines of growth, stickiness, virality, and then paid. That's a very helpful mental model for ruling out the things that could distract you from focusing on what's important. Lean Analytics is a book. They write about this idea of the one metric that matters. I think it's a bit dogmatic to think about having one metric, but it's a very helpful way of thinking, again, to sifting out what's potentially important but distracting from what's absolutely critical for this stage of the business. And understanding the notion of product market fit. Half the internet in startup world is about what product market fit is. I don't think anybody explains it better than Mark Andreessen, who's the guy who kind of coined that term. Understanding where you are in relation to that is a very helpful reminder of what it means to be focused on what's important at any given stage. So those are I'm Steve Blank about customer validation. That's how I would have given myself the lesson on how not to get distracted by a million different things all at once. It's difficult to translate what you think is important into what is the right thing to measure. You can look at what do other people measure. Daily actives versus monthly actives, the growth rate of this or that. I think there's a real skill in figuring out what is it that I really want somebody to be doing, and how can I translate that into a really meaningful metric that drives the right behaviors internally. Having a bunch of KPIs and not really being sure what you're optimizing for suggests that you don't really know what's essential to progress in the business. You may have been focused on a particular stage, but what metric really reflects the progress that you're trying to make as a business, perhaps also the progress that the customer is trying to make. There's this idea of the job to be done, which is a way of thinking about the progress that a customer is trying to make in their life and the products that they then recruit in order to make that progress. How do you reflect the progress a customer is trying to make into the way that you think about what to measure? Because if you can't measure the progress a customer makes, it's hard to optimize for that, and that's the drive of their decision when they're choosing what product to use, which we call customer acquisition. Tracking KPIs because other people measure something with the same name, even though their products and customer behavior is different, it's easy to search what KPIs do people use for growth. You find a whole bunch of stuff. Does that mean that KPI and that definition really measures what's essential to the progress you need to make at that stage in time in your business? So being quite disciplined about what's essential to progress and being willing to have specific kind of problem-solving sessions around that, if that's not happening, you're likely to end up with misdirected or an oversized collection of KPIs. Alan Clement talks about jobs to be done. He's not the architect of it, but he's written very well about it to explain the idea. So this is kind of what we're on that. This is at one point in time what we're looking at every day. Yes, it's not visual. That's not really the point. What's essential to progress here? What's going to drive the conversation? People are going to look at this. So, okay, there's a bunch of information, but which one should we really speak about? Every Monday morning, which one should we look at when we're looking at the impact of certain experiments? Every day people are getting this, and it felt like it was a good supply of information. I don't think it was helpful really at all. And I made it. It's a bit embarrassing. Collect at the rate that you can learn. It's all well and good to say, let's set up, let's instrument the app, let's collect all the event data that we can from app interactions or website interactions. Let's tag everything with Google Tag Manager and have it all flowing into Google Analytics. It consumes resource. It consumes resource to do all that. It consumes resource to fix it all when you realize you got it kind of wrong. It consumes resource to try and make sense of the data in the context of the things that you're trying to learn. Again, I think this is a discipline in choosing really carefully what it is you want to do and not being distracted by those other things that could be important, and they will be important at some point in time. They're just not important right now. The discipline of collecting at the rate you can learn means that you're focused on all the things around setting up the right tracking, having available capacity to fix it when it goes wrong because you know it's essential, and having available capacity to learn from it. There are always, from every idea of we could do this, unanticipated volumes of work to make it really work. So this is what this rule is about. For me, we would execute lots of growth hacks. I've got an idea for this and an idea for that. Great, we'd do it. We didn't really have the infrastructure in terms of data and technology or the process to see if it worked. So we weren't really able to learn. So it could have been a good idea, who knows. And my favourite saying, we'll A-B test it, without really knowing how to structure an experiment. Will A-B test it is quite a common one to throw out. There are many people who really understand how to set up the way you want to collect data, and yet, again, something to be disciplined about so you can actually learn from it. Brian Balfour, if you haven't heard of him, he's a very insightful chap about every aspect of orchestrating a growth capability. And in particular, I think about this with regards to setting up the process and the rhythm of a growth team. I say this a lot, words matter. We can talk about growth. Are we growing? Is this number or that number growing? I really encourage people to be painfully kind of thoughtful about what exactly do you mean by growth. What aspect of the whole customer experience needs to be increasing? Is it the total number of customers? Is it the total number of power users? So people using it with a certain frequency. Is it the daily frequency of all our users? Is it the daily frequency of the most consistent users? Being extremely specific about what growth really means, because only then are we able to have the right conversations about how to optimize for that. Otherwise, what commonly happens is we might use the same word with different meanings, and that's a fairly inefficient way to come about to the right solutions to make progress on growth, whatever it needs. The other part of words matter is with regards to customer-facing words. So hoping that speaking in terms of features is meaningful to people. No one wakes up in the morning thinking, no, I could do with a personal hub for money today. That's just not going to happen. People do think about how much money have I got, and how much money have I spent, and what can I afford, and how long will it take me to pull together the money for X, Y, Z. We made mistakes about the type of language that we've been using to speak to people, which really puts a constraint on our ability to communicate with them, and that's been a massive bottleneck, I think, in our ability to grow. So a different kind of type category of words, but it's about the care and the discipline in what is it I'm trying to communicate, and how am I trying to move people with the words that I choose to use. Jobs to be done, I think, is a very good framework for thinking about and uncovering the language that's meaningful to people in the context of the situation that they're going to come into when they might use your product. People are in the situation time and time again where your product might make sense. What's the language they use to describe their attitude, their problems? Because that's the language to use to speak about how you can help them make progress, and growth is just a synonym for making progress. Language market fit is a concept by this chap, Jim Scheinman. I don't think it's commonly spoken about, but it's the discipline to tailor the language to how we talk about the business internally, how we talk about the business externally. We're building, for example, a glossary of words. Sounds a bit overkill, but a glossary of words inside of Curve. This is what we mean when we talk about growth, or this is what we mean when we talk about X, Y, Z, just so that we've got a common language and we're better able to communicate with each other and solve problems. Amplitude, which is a product analytics blog, a product analytics tool. They have a good blog, which I've made into a simpler URL there, about measuring active users. And it's all about the definition, the words that you use to describe active users, how often people get it wrong, and that misleading articulation of active users can take people in the wrong direction as they're trying to optimize for growth. Stacey Barr, I'm pretty sure none of you will have heard of. She's totally dedicated to the skill of translating what it is we want to make progress in general as a business into how do we measure that. And she's the best person I've found who articulates the process that you can go through. Because if you get this right, if you get the right quantitative language around the growth that you want to achieve, I think, again, then you're much better able to solve the problems around growth. Where is it not working? What could we do to move the needle on this specific element of growth? So yeah, she's probably the only name amongst all the people I mentioned that you'd never have heard of, but she's got excellent content on that. So there we go. I've been there for a year and I've made quite a few mistakes. So now we're coming to the end of fundraising for round A. So I can make some New Year's resolutions at the end of this 12 months and hopefully put some of them into practice by recruiting people much more capable than I am, which is proving quite easy to do. Systematic creativity. So this is kind of the mentality that I want to instill across the business, starting with those people that I can influence the most because they sit nearest to me. So systematically, how are we going to make the choices around what matters? What are the biggest opportunities in the growth mechanic that we should focus on right now? What are the different points of leverage that we have to move the needle, whether it's acquisition or retention? Being systematic about translating that into an experimental structure that's meaningful. Being systematic about having the discipline to do these things quickly so that we're not trying to build perfect, engineered perfect ideas. We're trying to reduce the time to first feedback so we can figure out, did it work, what should we change, and then scale. So systematic creativity by having a systematic approach to it, but being desperately focused and then being as creative as possible in and around any given problem. So that's the first New Year's resolution, is systematic creativity. And pretty much all the guys on the cheat sheets who write about growth have ideas that feed into that. This one's fairly obvious, a common language. So whether it's a glossary kind of curve-specific terms or being extremely specific. And when it comes to KPIs, definitions are quite boring, but every KPI has an implicit question. What's it trying to answer? And I don't mean how much are we growing, but being extremely explicit about the question that a KPI is trying to answer reminds us of what we had in mind when we came up with it, and so the kind of the utility of that KPI, but also reminds us of the definition. What is it exactly that this number is reflecting? And crafting the right kind of language around the progress that the customer wants to make, that external perspective. So we're putting a lot of effort now into speaking to people, not just about what features do you want, what are the problems what are the problems you've got with your current solutions, but when you came to choose XYZ products, what was happening at that moment? What triggered you to start on this new journey to find a new product? Trying to rebuild the movie that was happening in people's lives, because no one really remembers exactly how they felt when they were choosing things. We have to try and go back to that moment and understand the language that was in their mind and try and find the patterns across many different people's choices and the movies they made when they chose new products, and using that to drive the language that we can use to communicate to new customers to drive growth. A job to be done, I think, is a great idea around that. And a team of T's. So the four hats that I think about: strategy, design, development, and data. It's easy, I think, to think about, oh, we'll recruit a developer, I'll recruit an analyst. Obviously I do, but I want every person that we recruit, I want to have perspectives across all of those different areas. I want to have a developer who's thinking about customer psychology. I want to have a designer who has some exposure and understanding of what it would take to put this into practice, so we're not concocting something that would take 2, 3, 4 weeks just to do development before we can do the experimentation. So a team of T's, people who can play across the different perspectives, but then bring a skill set, and as we figure out what it is we need to be brilliant at as a business, really drilling down into hiring people who are brilliant in that area, but again have the ability to play across the different perspectives: psychology, analytics, development, and design. And Brian's growth team, that's a link to a proper page, and he describes it very well. I think that's it.